Hello and welcome to episode 67 of the Freo Big Footy podcast. This week we'll go back and have a look at the game versus St Kilda last week, where Fremantle, particularly in the first quarter, showed a bit of that early season form before sort of tapering away in the second half. We'll have a look at Peel's march towards the finals in the Waffle with a comfortable win against South Fremantle, and then have a look at the big upcoming clash in the Derby 42, where Fremantle will aim to square up the ledger. Joining us is our usual resident Victorian expert, Seppo. How are you, mate?
I'm good, Centurions, and I'm excited. It's Derby week, one of the biggest fixtures on the Freo calendar, but it's just a bit more at stake this week, so it's a big week of football.
Certainly is, and we'll get and have a look at a bit more detail of that game later on, Seppo. But last week we saw Fremantle jump out of the blocks early before putting it on cruise control in the second half, where ended up running away comfortable 15 goals, 696 winners to 8 goals, 11, 59, and all the sort of game of two halves, Seppo, with Fremantle coming out of the blocks brilliantly in the first quarter and then sort of screeching the brakes on, particularly after half time.
Yeah, you can see that real burst kick on after, I think, Loney kicked the first one. It got a bit worrying in the first few seconds, but Freo just put the blitz on and kicked 12 goals straight before they finally missed. So it was great to see that good pressure and things that we've seen probably at the start of the season. This is what we talked about over the last couple of weeks. Freo just getting back to that early season form, and they kind of got there. It's a bit of a shame they didn't get over the 100 mark in the end, but to kick that straight and show that sort of attacking flair, even without Fife and Johnson out there, was really good to see. And just the accuracy of some of those kicks and even some of the big marks in the game, like Griffin and Mzungu and young Alex Pearce seemed to build in confidence again, going from forward and going down back when McFarlane got subbed out. Was great to see.
Yeah, maybe speaking of those big marks, Seppo, Jonathan Griffin may have taken Maney away from one of the marks of the year if he had it all name written all over it before Griff took it off him.
He's done that once or twice now. I think there was one where I thought that Sandilands was going to mark it and Griff just came in the front and snuck it away and got paid the mark, which was pretty good. But good to see he's actually showing a bit of fight and intent and real attack, and he's not as slow as I thought he was.
Yeah, probably the biggest talking point out of the game, Seppo, would have been probably the unfortunate calf scare, whether you call it a cork, injury, whichever word you want to do it. But the fact of the matter is, for most Fremantle supporters watching, seeing Luke McFarlane have any sort of doubt on his calf is a bit of a scare for anyone to watch. So hopefully, we'll get to it a little bit more later on, but I'd be very, very surprised if he plays this week in the Derby. And a couple of the other boys pulling up a little bit sore too.
Yeah, you could see the condition of the grounds. Obviously, got out there to hold up the banner early, and you could see in the ground there was sort of scuff marks, and it was quite boggy and chipped up a bit around the ground. So you could see they just parked the bus and didn't really put much effort into the last quarter, and they were just going into conservation mode. So it's probably smart, and I'm not sure how much of an injury it was to Luke before they pulled him off, but if it was all precautionary and there was no major damage done, it's probably a good move, because he certainly didn't move out of the defensive 50 all day, and just having a look at his GPS and his possessions are all inside that defensive 50, so he didn't really move much for while he was out there. And it was just interesting to see even just the way that Alex Pearce and Silvani worked in combination with Luke. It was good to see that they've we've got a sort of a functioning back six now again, and you can put one in there or one out, and the way that Alex came back into the side, it was like he hadn't missed a game, which was great to see.
Yeah, he took 10 marks on the day, and playing against Rewalt worked hard, and you know what you're going to always get from Alex, and I thought it was a terrific comeback considering he hasn't played all that much, even considering it was really only a half at Peel in the reserves, and then to come out and play on one of the premier players, and Rewalt didn't probably look himself the whole game out there, Seppo.
Kicked a couple of flour bags early on.
Yeah, particularly where he was kicking up the end we were at. It was, certainly unlike him, but full credit to Fremantle. They certainly made him take shots from difficult angles and right on the boundary line. But Silvani was fantastic. And once again, Ibbotson did know his All-Australian calculations, no harm with another terrific performance in that back six as well.
Yeah, he was quite strong in the back line and really directed the traffic out from the back line, but I think it's just going to be improved once we get Johnson back in there to do that role as well. It was very interesting to see the spread of goal kickers. The fact that we didn't have a standout, and all of Crozier, Griffin, Hill, Main, Pav, and Sandy all got two each. So it was good that there wasn't left to one person, and everyone got a crack up front, as well as some of the other guys. Like Alex Pearce got on the board with his second career goal and two other misses. So it would have been nice to see him get on with two as well, but it's really good to see the good spread of goal kickers up there. And it's a shame that Walters couldn't get on them, because I thought he had a pretty good game at half four, but just not playing as close to goal as he used to.
Yeah, he's definitely pushing up the ground a little bit more, and it took a couple of his marks across that half back line. And Crozier kicked another, as you said, Seppo, kicked another couple of goals, and he's just starting to feel a bit more comfortable. I'm sort of going to give him a pass the week before. I thought he obviously wasn't 100%, and you could sort of see him throwing up on the sidelines when he didn't kick any, but he looked good in the Richmond game at the G, where he kicked a couple, and certainly giving you just a couple of more goals than we was, maybe not the pressure that Ballas was, but certainly giving us a little bit more scoreboard impact than what Ballas was prior to injuring himself. And that may not necessarily have been always his fault, but he's looking like he's taking a couple of good grabs, and his use of the ball's been pretty solid.
Yeah, speaking of using the ball, I think our whole disposal efficiency on it was averaging out to 78%, but I think we were a bit smarter with our ball use, and even though there probably were a couple of moments that Ross would call it a bit cute with the footy, but definitely the way we moved it and hit people right in the centre. Obviously, a lot of the set shots were taken by Main and Pav right and directly in front. I think Hill was quite crucial with his kicking, and he'll probably feature in the best on ground votes for that, as well as probably Mundy and maybe Sandlands. But Hill's just been phenomenal with his distance on his kicking and how accurate he's been recently.
Oh, Hill's been, well, as you said, he's just been awesome. There's no other word to describe it. In fact, probably in the last 2 to 3 weeks, I don't think I've probably seen a better kicking performance, particularly as I said, just able to hit players on the chest consistently and not giving his opponent any chance. Lachie Neale also had a couple of inside 50s, and Sheridan sort of continued to push the ball up as well, Seppo, which is he's giving us that drive off half back. And while he continues to play this like this, you'd have to think Duffield's going to struggle to get a spot in the side or get his spot back.
Yeah, certainly you can see the change in the guard happening now over the course of this season. It's been the thing we probably all started talking about at the start of the year, what Sheridan's going to step up to, and he's just showing a bit of that now. And I think could be that confidence player that you leave him in there and he'll just grow into the role rather than sort of dropping him in, dropping him out, playing as sub. I think with these younger players who give him the extended run, they just seem to take it on board.
Yeah, what did you think of? There's been a lot of talk over the last, well, probably all season, Seppo, about Mazungu and whether he should get a spot. What did you make of his performance? I know he took a fantastic grab, but he also made a couple of pretty poor skill errors in terms of his decision making. So throughout the game, and he certainly was no Lone Ranger all the time. But what did you think of his performance? Where do you think he's going to be? Has he done enough to sort of keep his spot towards when we get closer to the finals action?
Oh, he's kind of like I think I used the word nondescript to describe him before. He's sort of playing on the wing with a bit of sort of slipping behind the ball outside of the square. Yeah, he doesn't really move and doesn't have the quickness of a winger like Hilly or Sheridan or one of these other guys would. So he's very good overhead and seemed to pull the odd thing here and there. And I think his experience probably helps, but it's just sort of hard to sort of pencil him in there. And it's been a very long time since we'd probably say Mazungu was in the best on ground. Yet he's never that bad. So he's sort of just that 18 to 22 depth player that just sort of does his role without being absolutely fantastic anymore.
The other thing I reckon we've noticed, Seppo, particularly since Pearce has gone forward, is that the likes of Barlow and that he doesn't seem to be spending as much, whether it's a coincidence or not, but Barlow doesn't seem to be spending as much time in the forward 50 as he has, particularly in the first half of the season. He seems to be getting up through the middle a little bit more, and whether that's just to give a bit more space for Pearce to run into, and particularly maybe with the introduction of Crozier in there as well, who can sort of mark and is a little bit taller. They just seem to have pushed Barlow up into the middle a little bit more around the stoppages and that sort of stuff, and he's responded with a much better performance. Like his numbers have seemed to have increased in the last 4 to 5 weeks.
Yeah, he got back out to 26 disposals for Barlow and attended some of the set of clearances, got a couple of himself, so it's good to see that he's actually getting in amongst it. For a while he would always be on the outside, but now I think probably with Fife missing and probably shifting a couple of the others around, we've seen more of the likes of Barlow and Subin, and I think De Boer actually attending the centre square. And it's just interesting where we're sort of mixing it up, and maybe they're just looking for different combinations at work at this time of year. But I'm liking it, and I think Barlow's getting back to his best.
Yeah, and once again, it seemed the combination with Griffin and Sandilands looked pretty solid, and I know Clark will be desperate to get back in the side, but at the moment, Griff seems to be doing everything that Ross Lyon asked of him, so it's going to be hard for Clark to get back in the side as it stands at the moment.
Yeah, I think the big thing about Griffin is he can actually show he can hit the scoreboard and move forward, and he's a confident, forward ruck or ruck forward, whatever you call it first. He's shown he can do more things than just plain old ruck. So he's a player that bleeds purple and loves to play for Freo, and I'm glad now that we've seen him play, that you sort of scratch their heads at the contract extension for a couple of year or a year or two. And now you can see why he's going to be a very good ruckman to just throw in there wherever we need.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what Freo decide to do with Clark. I'm personally a big advocate of Clark, and I know that at the moment he hasn't probably put it together. But most ruckmen do struggle a little bit until they reach their early 20s or mid to late 20s, Seppo, and I just think it'll be a massive mistake for us. Unless we're going to get a really creme de la creme key forward, there's just no way you'd want to be getting rid of Clark. Sandlands has maybe got 1 year left after this, you'd have to think. And he's just going to be a quality ruckman as he bulks up even more and just develops his game further. Each year he's sort of getting better. There's still definitely room for improvement, but I think it'll be a big mistake for us to get rid of him myself.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think if they decide to go that way, people, I know there's a lot of guys on the board who don't rate him, but you'll just about see that any team looking for a half decent ruckman will certainly more than happy to take him off our hands. That's for sure.
Oh, for sure. But we've definitely got our ruck stocks covered. I think when you still look at Hanneth, that probably hasn't had the opportunity this year, and Moller sounds like he's almost ready to come off that rookie list. Not yet to get senior games, but at least he's done his probation period and really developed, and still a couple of years away. Like you said, you've got to wait to their 24, 25, but Moller's shown a bit as well that we've got some good ruck depth right the way through to our youngsters.
All right, absolutely. Is there anything else that you want to add into the discussion for this game, Seppo? Because it was, as you said, the second half wasn't much of an idea, and we can probably move on and have a look at the derby, unless you've got something else you want to bring in for it.
No, that's probably it. You can see it was all shut up shop in that last quarter, and there's a couple of people annoyed that Freo didn't get over that 100 mark or the 40-point margin, as a lot of people might expect them to. But I predicted pretty much to the point we'd win by 36 or 38. So
especially when they got them at over $4 for the price, Seppo.
Yeah, it was a bit annoying, but let's just happy to get the 4 points at this stage, and we move on.
I think we're just slowly starting to see that ball movement improve and get back to that sort of round 8 level as well, Seppo, particularly in that first quarter. You can see the guys are really trying to move the ball on a little bit more, and the turnovers were a little bit less this week compared to the week before, and although we didn't sustain it at the same time, as you said, Ross seems to shut up shop a little bit, so therefore, it's hard to take much out of that second half. But this week I think will be a good test for us as we get into it.
Mm.
During the week, on the Saturday, Seppo, Peel moved to consolidate their spot in the finals for the first time with a 30-point win at the end of the day against South Fremantle at Fremantle Oval in pretty ordinary conditions, but Peel ended up winning 14 goals, 13-97 to South Fremantle, who were accurate with 11 goals, won 67 and kicked 9 goals straight up until three-quarter time. Once again, the usual sort of suspects had pretty solid games. With the likes of Ballard getting 33 touches, Ed Langdon with 26, Brody Gray 24, and Duffy pushing for a spot or a claim as well with 24 possessions and 3 goals too.
And it's good to see the young Irishman Sean Healy getting the scoreboard again, and even other guys like kind of Blakely picking up 29 touches. He's just been ultra consistent. I don't think going back over his stats for the year, he's had too many games where he's had below 20. So it's really good to see that, right the way through the year, looking back over, I can only see one game where he actually got less than 20 disposals. So I'm not sure if he picked up an injury that game, but it's fantastic to see that these young guys are coming in and have a big impact.
Yeah, probably the most interesting thing I think out of the Peel scenario this year in terms of Fremantle down the track, apart from the form of our young players, as you mentioned, Seppo, will be the likes of whether Fremantle will look at a potential player like Bootsma, who we all know about his issues that he had, particularly while he was at Carlton, with the social media and that sort of stuff. But he's a good size at 193. Had 24 touches last week, 10 marks, and just seems to be growing each week. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if Fremantle maybe look at him with a late rookie pick,
Yeah.
just in that sort of role in developing another key defender.
You can definitely see all the training watchers and the people that are the Peel watchers, guys getting down to the game and watching it, know that there's something worthwhile with Bootsma, and he's been putting on good numbers. And they say he's more of an agile Dawson type, or a Dawson with a better kick and set of skills on him. So he's definitely something worth a look at. And to say that he's already been at AFL level and taken there, if he sorts himself out, he can be a handy addition. And I wonder if he will nominate for the draft, or will look at picking him up through the rookie list, because he's certainly worth a spot there.
Yeah, and I think it's certainly going to be a benefit to us as well, Seppo, as a club, because as long as Peel is still playing finals, depending on what happens for us in the AFL finals, it's going to allow our second string or reserve players to continue playing, which is going to be really important. The last thing you really want to do is, when you've got a finals campaign in the AFL, is then have all your reserve players not getting a game for 2 or 3 weeks, losing that match fitness. So it's really important for us to make sure that we do consolidate and get that spot in the top 5 in the waffle.
Yeah, it's good to see it goes right to round 23. Obviously, Peel playing South again, I believe, and that takes us to the end of August. So at least, they've got the final system after that, and they'll be playing right the way through. And finally, Peel get involved with finals. I'm not sure if the exact position will be at the end of this, for the couple more games to go, but let's just hope they give a bit of a final shake-up with the good talent they've got there.
Yeah, for sure, and just encourage a few more people, or particularly some of those younger guys, to hang around at Peel and continue to play, which is really important for the development of Fremantle as well. Moving on, Seppo. Obviously, the big clash this week, Derby 42. Currently, the Eagles lead that head-to-head 21-20, and every week, we no doubt hear the usual stories about, it's Fremantle's grand final, etc., etc. But there is a little bit more on the line this week, particularly for West Coast. Not so much ourselves. We only really need one more win out of the last 2 to consolidate a top 2 spot. But get 2 wins and all of a sudden no one can catch you for the number 1 spot. But a big number of ins and outs this week, Seppo, if you want to have a look through it for us.
Yeah, so we've got the Sunday games. We've just got squads at the moment. So for Fremantle, we've got into the side comes the wonderful Michael Johnson, probably the Brownlow medalist for this year, providing he can get a couple more votes for the rest of the year, Nat Fyfe. Clancy Pearce also comes in with the big white shorts. And young Connor Blakely comes into the side with Lockie Weller omission. Going over to the Eagles, they bring in Callum Sinclair, Tom Barras, I think is pronounced, yeah. Jamie Bennell, Brant College, Josh Hill, and Carlton X Kane Lucas. And out of the side goes Scott Selwood, Jerry McGovern with that hamstring, and Mark LaCroix with the suspension. So obviously Kane Lucas is the first game for him if he makes the final side. So, and it's always a talking point. So we'll go down to the umpires. We've got Jeff Daglish, Sean Ryan, Scott Jeffrey, and let's hope he doesn't get called upon, but the emergency is Dean Margetts.
Yeah, he's actually been not too bad this year. I have to give him a little bit of a credit compared to some of the likes like a Farmer, etc. But leaving that aside, hopefully that'll have no influence on the game. But Seppo, just having a look at let's leave the interchange just for the moment, but you have to just about think, with the exception of probably Ballantyne, this would be our best possible side that we could put out in the park. I'm not saying they'll all play, but as it's listed at the moment, that would just about be close to the best possible side we can play.
Yeah, I think Ballantyne is the only exclusion from our best 22 all year, basically on form and who's been playing well and playing at their best. So we are getting close to the right side. So everything, all the stars are aligning and providing no one else comes out. And I know there's been talk about McFarlane and everything coming out, but like you say, as you see it, without the final name being there, if you look at that side, you'd think it's be capable of taking on anyone. It's a very strong set of names out there.
And also we've got the, whether you agree with him or disagree with it, you've also got Dawson, who's probably another player who'd be trying to push his way into the 22. But based on what we've seen so far this year, Seppo, you can't say he'd be certainly a walk-up start in the 22 as it sits at the moment. So, some would probably argue maybe that Ballantyne's form this year probably dictates that he probably not necessarily be in that automatic starting 18 either as it sits.
It's going to be a dilemma when you get to those last two games of the round. If they are resting players and you're talking about bringing some of those guys back in, what it does to the side and who earns their spot and who's been putting in the effort all this year. Because there's players, I suppose, like Sheridan and Crozier and I suppose even Alex Pearce that he's put a couple of games under his belt now and he's almost part of the furniture now in the best 22. That it's going to be hard for some players that have only had a couple of games this year. Does experience and age overwrite all the hard work and effort that these younger guys have put in there? And even guys like Clark, how much does he need to do in the waffle to displace Griffin? Or if they're happy with a combination of Sandy and Griffin, what's it going to do to that? So it's an interesting prospect over the next couple of weeks, and it'll be interesting just to see from this side in terms of player management. Do we start to see that come in now, or are they going to lock up the wins and then start to play around with it once all the mathematical calculations have been done?
I think you have to be. If there's any doubt on any of our players, and I'm talking like our sort of top players like Pav or Mundy or McFarlane, you just don't risk it. So I think we just got to put them in cotton wool and whatever happens. I mean, if we look at the game at the moment, West Coast would probably have, probably arguably at least maybe three of their more important players with Nat Nui, McGovern and Lacroix all out from the side, and so they're going to struggle a little bit as well. And I mean, if you look at the ins that they've brought in, you wouldn't really say that. I mean, Sinclair's had a pretty good year, but none of the other ins there really stand out as being.
It doesn't strike fear into your eyes.
No, that's exactly right. And I'm sure the likes of and even when you consider that, even with those in there, you've got the likes of McGinnity and those sort of guys. I mean, he'll certainly battle hard and give you a contest, but he certainly is not going to have the same class as some of their other players that they won't have playing in the game. That's for sure. Looking at the interchange, Seppo, as we do every week, there's some really quality players on that interchange, and it's going to be interesting. I mean, you'd have to think that, as I said, there has to be a few late changes, you would think. So, but based on what we see there, as it sits, who would you have as your four on the bench there?
Oh, I suppose if you say that McFarlane is, we're taking a no-risk policy, take McFarlane out, throw Silvani onto the field, and then you've got out of that interchange of Barlow, Mzungu, De Boer, Crozier, Pearce, and Blakely, you probably just run with the more senior types and go Barlow, Mzungu, De Boer, and Crozier. So you'd think it'd be Clancy Pearce and young Connor Blakely who misses out. So unfortunately we lose Lockie Weller, but probably won't see the debutant unless they decide there's one more senior bloke like Mundy that's carrying something, or Pav, and they can shuffle something else around to make it work. But I think that's probably the way of going. Maybe one more change to this final squad after tomorrow's training, and it might just be we're going in with Johnson and Silvani as our two key position players with Ibbotson playing in there, with Alex Pearce the option to drop back, or we could completely change it up. But I think, to me, that's just the most logical thing to do.
I know it's a little bit out of left field, but for me, Seppo, I wouldn't be surprised at all if Pav doesn't play. I wouldn't be surprised if Blakely maybe does come in for his debut, and they'll play Fife out of the forward 50.
And that might be a smarter way of even managing Fife. No, he's not coming in straight on ball, play forward. We noticed Richmond, he was playing on the wing, sort of half forward, so it's not the first time it happens. It's not strange to thinking, but it is maybe one way you could get the Blakely debut happening.
And what it would do for Fife is obviously being in his groin, you don't want to agitate it with side to side movement. Where playing forward, he'd be running directly at the ball. He could go up and take a few hangers and whatnot, but he wouldn't have that sort of movement that he would require in the midfield. And you could probably put him up there for small bursts and as you needed to, and it does give you that little bit of flexibility. So I wouldn't be surprised if Pav doesn't play. That if they may look at doing that, they may leave Fife up there along with Pearce and one of the ruckmen, and then look at playing Blakely in for a debut, and then he could run through that midfield and a little bit more, give you a little bit more grunt through the midfield there.
It does seem like an unsettled forward line for us if you did take Pav out of there, and when you sort of look along the line of Walters, Main, Lockie Neal as it's named, Alex Pearce, Jonathan Griffin, and say if you throw Fife in there, that'd certainly be a different forward line, and nothing probably that the Eagles would have on tape of us of operating with, obviously, other than the last week or two where you've probably had Griffin and Pearce playing forward. So certainly it will throw a bit of a cat amongst the pigeons and maybe not give away what we might be operating later in the finals, where no doubt we'll probably come across Eagles at some point, which will be exciting in some point. But it's definitely, you can see different ways of doing this, and not only player management, protecting our midfield, but not giving away our game plan.
Yeah. The other interesting part as well, whether Fremantle will try and stretch them tall, Seppo, with Barras and Schofield in there, whether they look to try and maybe, if they go a little bit taller, it may force the Eagles to move Yo out of the midfield, and they'll force him down a little bit further down back. I mean, they've got the likes of Wellingham who will provide that run off half back, and they'll try and obviously free up Hearn. And then you've got Xavier Ellis, who unfortunately is made out of sticky tape for them, so he can tend to sort of cop quite a few injuries. He just can't seem to get a run at it, which is, you never want to see any player get injured all the time, and but unfortunately for them, he just hasn't been able to sort of consistently put it on the park. So when you're looking at the midfield there, and I mean, some of their guys have had some really, like Gaff's had a career year, and they'll certainly be looking to shut down his outside run. And then the likes of Shepherd and probably, Wellingham have probably had probably career best years for them, and even maybe Sheed as well.
Yeah, I think Gaff probably could be the only Eagle that's probably sitting in front of Britis in their best and fairest and Brownlow count. So it's definitely something that's got to make him accountable, because he's certainly getting better as the year goes on. But thank God there's no Lacroix out there, because I think it was Sutcliffe that mentioned that in the last derby, Sutcliffe got hold of, Lacroix got a hold of Sutcliffe and kicked a couple on him. So it's one less person to worry out there. And obviously the other exclusions of no McGovern, who's probably had some good games in the past, and no Nat Nui. Unfortunate circumstances mean that at least we might be able to get a hold of the midfield, because something at the start of the year probably didn't rate the Eagles midfield, but they've been managing to do it a lot. I'm not sure if off the back of Pritis or, Marston's and Gaff playing really well, or Nat Nui pushing it, winning it on the outside, but it means that Sandlands and our A-grade midfield combo can hopefully keep it out of their two dangerous forwards, Kennedy and Darling's hands, because that's certainly one way that I'm looking at this list going, this is where Eagles could possibly get us. But once again, if you starve their forwards, that's how we're going to win this game.
Yeah, last week was the first time we haven't seen that Nui play for a number of weeks, and even though Lycett I thought was reasonable against them, Seppo,
and they had to throw Yo in there in certain stages to ruck as well. So
yeah,
that's pretty hard of them not to even have Sinclair in there as well.
But we noticed that by doing that, it certainly affected their ability to win the clearances. And if you look at the team stats, they ended up getting beaten quite comfortably in the clearances in the end compared to what they had when Nat Nui was in there. I think they lost the centre clearances 14-8, and really at the end of the day, if you look at the scoring from that really was probably the difference between the two sides. So Hawthorn ended up winning off 15-6 from the centre clearances and winning the overall clearances 57-44. So, because not only was Nat Nui sort of giving them the palm down service against the lower ruckman in the league, but now Fremantle with Sandilands in there will certainly dictate where the ball is going to be going, and they'll just make sure that the reality is they'll make sure that the ball goes any direction where Pritis isn't. Even though he doesn't always, he's not a great kicker of the ball. He certainly, out of clearances and congestion, is very good at bringing the ball to the outside runners that they do have. Any other matchups stand out for you in this one, Seppo?
Uh, Probably not really. We've probably covered off the major ones, and a lot will get down to what the final teams is. So it's unfortunate we can't. We're just hypothesising on the combination of, say, McFarlane or Pav out there, and it'll be interesting to see if they make the call on the two. But it will be exciting to see. Obviously, if Connor Blakely comes in, you'd think he'd probably get the subs vest just to be eased into it, like Lockie Weller was, even though you'd rate him to say jump in the midfield and just do what you've been doing in the waffle. I think if they do bring him in, it'll have to be through the sub. It's the way we've been doing it pretty much, except for Alex Pearce obviously being a key size. But it will be interesting to see if he does and put on a good show like Lockie Weller did for his first two games. It'll be quite interesting.
The other one interesting matchup will be down in defence and how we line up down there. That'll obviously depend a bit on who we have available, Seppo. But looking at the Jack Darling, you'd have to think that Ibbetson's played on him pretty well in the past, so he might be a natural matchup, and Fremantle will be trying to get someone in that space where Kennedy likes to run into. Now, McFarlane has had the wood on Kennedy for a number of years and always manages to keep him to a low count, but without him playing there, they'll probably have to rely on Silvani doing that role, and they'll obviously be trying to keep Johnson or Ibbetson free, so Sinclair will have a pretty important role down there, being that extra tall to make one of our other defenders down there accountable.
Yeah, and you could certainly see it back in the Saints game, the combination of Ibbetson and Silvani, and while Luke was even there or not there, but you could see they worked really well in terms of who was matching up who, and the times that Ibbetson had to take on a taller, he seemed to do it quite well, and I think he was matched up at Bruce for certain stages and then got in there under McCartan and Rewalt and did a really good job. So he can play taller, so if Sinclair or Darling sort of end up in his direction, that Ibbetson's capable, but it will be, how Johnson goes in there and if he's, lost his yard of pace or can defend well and hopefully carry himself against one of those two big guys.
One of the interesting talking points, probably particularly about a month ago, Seppo, was to talk about the Weagles web, so to speak, and the defensive setup they had down the ground, and now that they've lost a couple of players, it'd be interesting to see if their second string players that they have come in are going to be just as effective. Fremantle showed early in the year with quick ball movement that they were able to really decimate West Coast in the first quarter and a half, and guys like Chris Maston and that were just sort of non-existent in their defensive pressure and allowing Hill to get off the chain and that sort of stuff. It'll be interesting when looking at Fremantle's midfield versus the West Coast, particularly like if you look at the likes of Hutchings, Maston, Priddis, Gaff, they're all very small midfielders, and Fremantle have got a much taller side, and it'll be interesting to see how Fremantle A, move the ball, and B, if they're stuck one-on-one, how they can isolate those players and get the one-on-one marking matchups that other teams may not necessarily get against them, being such a small or such a big differential in the midfield sizes.
Yeah, certainly, even without Nat Nui there, the get-out kick to Sandlands against some smaller tops around will obviously come into play a bit, but you can see the way we moved our ball quick against probably both GWS and Saints is those quick, short, sharp kicks and stretching them with speed. So I'm not sure if this will work against some of the Eagles, and depending on the weather, I was just going to cast my over to see how bad the weather is, because I heard there's a bit of rain forecast, but you'd hate for us to play in a wet slog again. So you just hope it's dry enough for us to get a comfortable lead, and then if it wants to rain after that, fair enough. But
I think they said it's about a 30% chance, but it's not that heavy, Sep. I think the maximum they reckon will be 0.5 millimetre or something. So it's not going to be anything too influential, you'd think, in the game. And I think if it is wet, I think that's going to be to our advantage with the bigger bodies.
Yeah, certainly. It will definitely play into our favour, and as probably we've been experienced, and I've read someone on the forum saying I can't remember a full AFL year, or at least for us, been playing in so many games affected by rain. So let's just hope that that somehow benefits us and we can get through and hopefully have no injuries, because when you look at it, there's a lot of other sides, and the top 8 have all been hit pretty hard, and we've had our fair share with Johnson and obviously Dawson and suppose Ballantyne come out with long-term injuries, but we seem to be getting most of them back or at the right time and shaping right up.
Yeah, our forward running patterns last week were a lot better as well, Seppo, particularly in the first quarter. We were able to have guys leading in different spots and being able to be isolated one-on-one, and I think that was reflected by the fact that we had a number of different goal kickers in that first quarter, and guys were actually running into space. It wasn't like, I know there was a couple of contested marks with Griffin and Mzungu, but a number of times we saw Pav on the lead, Crozier on the lead, I think Pearce took one on the lead. So I think our patterns up forward certainly seem to be a little bit better, and I think if we get that isolation one-on-one with our players down there, if we get enough ball in there, I think, even if we do have a couple of outs, I think we should get enough one-on-one opportunities to make life certainly difficult for West Coast and be able to get the win.
Mm.
What do you think of the talk, Seppo, about, I know David King was talking about it last night, whether it's to our advantage of West Coast finishing second and obviously making Hawthorn have to travel the first week and not get the top two finish. But I think with the games that are coming up, West Coast have got a couple of tough ones anyway with the Bulldogs who would love the open running style of the main stadium, and then a tough one in Adelaide as well against the Crows. So I don't think even if you decide to put the queue in the rack for this one, there's no guarantee that it would necessarily that Hawks would necessarily finish behind. We've got pretty two easy games to finish.
Yeah, I suppose you don't want to look at what's reliant on other results. I know Ross will probably just wanted the wins in the bank and bank the 4 points until mathematically nothing can change, because you never know what could happen. We could lose to the Eagles and all of a sudden we can lose our next couple, or something might happen and we might forfeit top spot. So you just want them to win and make absolutely sure that things won't change. And and we might face Eagles and Hawks at different stages during the finals. Not sure if we'll get to see them both, but I suppose you just got to play what's in front of you, and you never know. Geelong could upset the Hawks, and they could start slipping out, and we may end up paying them anyway. So things just work out a certain way, and nothing's a given now with 4 weeks to go, and probably that's when we'll probably see the last two. And if we've got a huge gap, that's when we can probably start to have the luxury to play around with it.
Yeah, I think the other interesting point is I think that Seppo, I think Mzungu and De Boer are playing for the one spot left over, and it'll be interesting to see what jobs both of them get this week, because they're both more of that lockdown defender, both like midfielder type, and it'll be interesting to see which way Lyon goes, and particularly who does play on Gaff, and whether they play one on Gaff and one on Pritis, or whether they play one on Shuey or something like that. I think one of those two guys won't play in the best 22 when we get to the sort of pointy end of the season. So I think both those guys are playing for the one spot myself. What are your thoughts?
Space for one other that's probably been in and out of the side, or one of the younger guys as well, to potentially sit up in that position. And can't imagine someone like Duffield coming back. He's not really in the mix for that spot anymore. So it is that sort of winger, utility midfielder position that we're sort of having flooding with De Boer and Mzungu. I think Subin's now probably had a good patch, not a brilliant patch, but good form to show that he's in there to help push the ball forward. And he definitely, you can see his strength in the side. So I'm not sure if he's in the same position, but definitely out of those two, they are sort of fighting for that one spot. But they somehow both seem to be in the side at the moment. So you never know what can change, though.
Yeah, the other talk this week as well, Seppo, has been about whether Mundy would play this week or not, or whether they'll rest him. Judging by the fact that he trained the other day and seemed to train quite strongly, I'd be very surprised if he takes this week off. But I wouldn't be surprised at all if he doesn't play the game against Melbourne at Domain in 2 weeks' time. If he does play this week, I would think that'll be the game they'll probably rest him. And if Blakely doesn't get a debut this week, he will certainly get the debut, I think, against Melbourne in a couple of weeks' time.
Oh, definitely. And they'd probably see even the likes of Langdon and Gray probably get a game by then, and we'll be looking at a lot more.
All right, so come to the important part of the night, Seppo. What's your tip for this week?
I'm going to say Freo is going to get out to a blistering lead, park the bus, and scrape over the line by 17 points.
Yeah, I think it'll be pretty similar. I think Fremantle will try and get out to that lead. I think they'll be probably a little bit stronger than they were last week and not park it too early, but I think it'll be a comfortable 4-goal, well, as comfortable as a 4-goal win can be. I think, Seppo, that, I think West Coast will certainly have their moments in the match, no doubt. But I just feel that Fremantle, particularly in that midfield, just look a little bit stronger on paper across the board. And I know that the likes of Selwood and that sort of thing hasn't been particularly good this year, and West Coast have certainly improved a lot from the previous year. But I just don't think that at the moment they're probably quite up to the match, particularly without their best 22 in there. With the likes of Nat Nui and McGovern, I don't know, Mackenzie's out for the year, but they're just missing too many of their quality best 22. I think if they had their best side in there this week and we had a couple out, I think it would certainly maybe lean it, square it up a little bit closer. But with the likes they've got missing, I just can't see them getting enough of the ball in the midfield and getting the ball where they want it, in particular the way Sam Lands has been using the ball to cause us enough damage.
There's one other factor we probably haven't taken into consideration, that it's actually our home derby. So there is another little edge on the home supporters there getting behind the team. So we beat them in the away derby at the start of the year, and this is our time to level the ledger and get the home win.
Yeah, and if you look at the interchange for West Coast there, Seppo, you think Barras would have to play considering that McGovern's out, and then you've got the likes of probably Butler, who plays that defensive mid, and Sheed, who's been in the midfield. But you look at the last one in there, none of those players really stand out as being, exceptional. I thought they might have given Lamb another go, but I mean, College has shown bits at East Perth this year. Hill has his moments, but seems to, hasn't sort of struck a light during the derby and struggled to get back in the side. I mean, if Kane Lucas plays, well, then all the better for us, I think. And Jamie Bennell, they might try and give him a bit of run off half back, but once again, he's struggled to hold his spot as well. All right, any other big game grudge match before the derby this week over in Melbourne, Seppo?
So over in Melbourne, we've got the massive grudge match, number 10. It's the big battle between the Fitzroy Dockers and the East Coast Eagles. We've just finalised our team tonight, and I've earned myself a spot in the wing. So we'll be looking at playing at Fleming Park and Albert Street in Brunswick East this Sunday at 1:30. Well, the game's due to start at 2, but 1:30 when it all kicks off. So we've got a big team to take on the Eagles, and I think we've lost the last one or two. So I'll be looking to get that back and then head down to the Great Northern Hotel at 4 to watch the big game. So if you can't make our game and want to come down and at least watch the derby with all us, I've got probably half the Great Northern booked out just for this derby, and they're doing a good job promoting it, and we'll have a massive day on Sunday.
Yeah, hopefully we'll only be half a game or one win away from securing the top spot for the rest of the season, Seppo, and looking forward to the final.
Our first minor premiership.
Yes. Yeah. I don't think it means a great deal in the grand scheme of things, but it will be some form of trophy. I think they still have the McClellan Trophy or something like that. But eyes will be definitely on the bigger prize come the end of the season, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Thanks again for joining us this week, Seppo, and no doubt we're looking forward to a bumper derby game this week.
Yes.
And we will see you again next week, Seppo. We're looking forward to hopefully just dissecting a memorable derby game and hopefully another Dockers win.
Yes, we'll do, and I'll enjoy Sunday and report back on the board.
All right, thanks for everyone for listening, and we will catch you again next week. Bye for now.